Hey guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today I'm going to be covering a topic that I get tons of questions on all the time, and ultimately I think will just be very helpful information for anyone who's applying for the upcoming residency cycle. Today I'm going to be discussing the topic of how to apply for residency in the smartest way possible to maximize the number of interviews you get, which will then maximize the chance that you're going to match. So the video is going to be broken up into two parts. The first half of the video, I'm going to be covering how to apply in a smart way, which will maximize your chance of matching. And the second part of the video, I will talk about things you can do to enhance your application to make sure you get that interview invite and to make sure that you stand out just a little bit. So without further ado, waste no more time, let's jump in. So in terms of applying smart, there are three things you want to take into consideration as a whole. The first being, how competitive is the specialty that you're applying for? Second, how competitive are your step 1 and your step 2 CK scores? And third, what is your applicant status? So in terms of how competitive is the specialty that you're applying for, the primary care specialties tend to be on the lesser competitive end of the spectrum, and surgery subspecialties tend to be on the more competitive end of the spectrum. If you're considering applying for a competitive specialty, you should consider applying to a larger number of programs and potentially a backup specialty. If you're applying to a lesser competitive specialty, you can consider applying to a lesser number of programs. In terms of your step 1 and step 2 CK score, if you have a higher and more competitive score, you can apply to a lesser amount of programs. If you have a lower, less competitive score, you want to consider applying to a larger number of programs. What is a larger number of programs? What is a smaller number of programs? This is going to be dependent largely on your applicant status. And what I mean by applicant status is either your visa status or just what type of applicant you are. Are you a USMD? Are you a USDO? Are you a non-US IMG? Are you a US IMG? These are going to determine the average number of programs that you ideally should be applying to. So if you are a USMD student, they recommend applying to about 30 programs to make sure you hit that 15 interview mark to assure that you're going to have roughly 100% chance of matching. In order to hit that same 15 interview 100% match statistic, you are going to want to apply to about double that if you are a USDO. That means applying to about 60 to 70 programs on average. If you are a US IMG, consider applying to about 100 to 120. And if you are a non-US IMG, you would consider applying to about 120 to 150 to ensure that you're going to hit that 15 interview mark and assure that you're going to have that 100% chance of matching. So during this process, you want to be realistic. It's a very expensive process and you want to make sure that you match. So you have to be realistic with yourself and consider applying to programs who you know have matched people from your school, matched people with your step scores, matched into this specific specialty. You want to take those things into consideration and be realistic. However, I am a reach for the stars person. I will not tell you, don't apply to any dream programs. I personally limited myself to 5 to 7 dream programs, but keep in mind it's very expensive. So you don't want to apply to all of these high-end programs if you have not that great of a step score, or if they don't even take your visa, or if they don't even accept international students. You don't want to waste your money doing that. So do your research first, which is what I'm going to talk about next. So where should I even bother applying? Who even accepts applicants like me? That's what I'm going to talk about next. This can be an overwhelming and daunting process because there are so many programs to choose from. And if you're applying to 100 or 120 or 150 programs, you're just like, how the heck am I supposed to pick 120 or 150 programs? It's crazy. So I'll give you guys a few resources that will help you to narrow your list, but also will help you apply to programs where you are going to be a competitive applicant. So the first resource I'll talk about is called Frida. And Frida is an online residency database that lets you filter by absolutely everything. So the first thing I would recommend filtering by is specialty. Obviously, you only want to look at the specialties you're interested in. So you can select what specialty you wanted to view first. After filtering by specialty, if you are a non-US IMG, I recommend filtering by visa status. And the reason I recommend this is because if a program doesn't sponsor your visa, what's the point in applying? It's a waste of money. If they're not going to sponsor your visa, don't bother applying. Next, I would start filtering by step scores. A lot of programs filter by step 1 or step 2 CK scores. So if you filter by this, you can at least get a sense of the programs that you're going to be competitive in. So simply filtering by these three things, you already get a pretty good idea of a list of programs that you're going to be relatively competitive in. If you need more programs to hit that 30, 70, 120, 150, whatever it is, mark, you can consider applying to a backup specialty. And the way you would go about this is going back to the beginning, filtering by a different specialty, refiltering by visa status, and refiltering by step scores. And you can add those programs to your list that you've already compiled for your primary specialty. If you need less programs because you are a competitive applicant and your list is very long, you can consider filtering by anything that's important to you. So the next resource I'm going to talk about is called Doximity. And Doximity is basically an app and website. I personally think the app is a little more user-friendly that you can use to help you narrow down your list. So after you filter by specialty, Doximity will show you the program's overall nationwide ranking. And if you further filter by state, it will show you their overall statewide ranking as well, just based off of the general overall quality of the program. It will also show you fellowship match rates. It will show you board pass rates. It can show you comments and reviews by recent graduates of that program. It shows you where graduates go on to practice in the future. And the thing that I think is the most helpful is it shows you a list of the top 5 feeder schools for those current residents. So anyone from PGY1 to PGY3, the top 5 schools where those residents come from will be listed under each program. So the next resource I'll talk about is called Match a Resident. And Match a Resident is basically an online system that allows you to enter a bunch of information about your application, and it will tell you what programs you are going to be competitive in applying to and which ones you are most likely to get an interview at. I personally did not use Match a Resident's system because I used Frida and Doximity, created my own Excel spreadsheet with step scores, location, whether they accept IMGs, the percentage of IMGs in that program, how many students have matched there from my school in the last 3 to 5 years. And while I did like doing the research on my own, it was a lot of work. So Match a Resident is a really great way to save all of that legwork if you're willing to pay for it. So the next resource I'm going to talk about is specific for St. George's University students, and that is the SGU Residency Appointment Directory. SGU Residency Appointment Directory. Google it. So basically, this is a list compiled by SGU every single year of where all of the students who applied for match that year matched. So I recommend looking at this because this will give you a good idea of where people match for the specialty you plan to apply for. I recommend going back 3 to 5 years and kind of counting how many people have matched at each program that you might be interested in because, for example, I did mine for 3 years. I had a column number of people matched in 2017, 2018, and 2019. So I had a general idea of how many people were going to be in that program when I got there. That means when I'm interviewing, I'm going to meet someone from my school. Likewise, if you're applying for surgery, perhaps you want to go back 5 years because surgery is a 5-year program and someone from SGU within the last 5 years will be there when you arrive on interview day. So like I said, this resource is more specific for SGU students. However, I include it in this video because 1, SGU students watching this should know about it, and 2, if your school doesn't have it posted online, they still probably keep track of where their graduates match. So it is worth reaching out to someone and seeing if you can get that data. So the final resource I'm going to talk about is called NRMP Charting the Outcomes. Google NRMP Charting the Outcomes, and there will be a large PDF document that's a bunch of pages long, and it's super helpful. This is another way you can get an idea of how competitive you are for whatever specialty you're applying for. So basically what this document is a bunch of data. And every year the NRMP compiles this data so that applicants in the future have an idea how competitive the specialty they're applying for is. So this document is broken up by specialty. So you can scroll down to your specialty and then it will further break it down into matched versus unmatched. It will show you the average step score for the applicants who matched into this specialty versus the average step score of those who did not match into this specialty. It will show you the average number of research experiences for those who matched into this specialty versus the average number of research experiences for those who did not match into this specialty. That's just a short list. It shows you a lot of different data. This is helpful because it gives you an idea of how competitive the specialty was this year, which will predict pretty closely how competitive it will be next year. So the last thing I'll say in terms of applying smart is if you're an IMG, consider applying to the Northeast. I don't say that because I'm from the Northeast. I say that because every year a list comes out with the top IMG friendliest states. And every single year, the Northeast is very, very strongly represented. New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Connecticut, Massachusetts are high on the list every single year. Even if you don't want to go to the Northeast, you can consider applying there and move after residency because residency is only 3 to 5 years. If you want nothing more than to match and you are an IMG, consider applying to the Northeast. If you really hate the cold, consider California and Florida. They are usually on the list as well, but usually not as high as the Northeast. So in the second part of this video, I'm going to be discussing how to make your application stand out, which will hopefully get you that interview and then hopefully translate into you matching. So the first thing I recommend is making your application well-rounded. I think too often people hyper-focus on I must have research, so much research that then they don't do anything else and all of their other categories are left blank. They don't volunteer, they don't do any community outreach, and all they do is this research. So while research is fantastic, and for some specialties you absolutely need research to apply, make sure that you have a little bit in every single area on your application because it makes it look a little bit stronger and hopefully makes you stand out just a little bit more. So the next thing I'm going to talk about in terms of enhancing your application literally does not require you leaving your couch. In fact, you don't have to sign up for a research project and you don't have to go out and do community service. All you have to do is write down your hobbies. So how are my hobbies supposed to get me a residency? Well, to be honest, if you were going through thousands of applications and you already filtered by step score and now you have all these people who are on the even playing field, you would probably default to looking for things that set these people apart. And the best way to do that is to just kind of get to know someone. And the only way you can do that through the paper application is to look at the hobbies section. So write down hobbies that you are passionate about, that you genuinely love, that might make you unique. Even if you don't think that they make you unique, but you are very passionate about them, write them anyways, because this is going to be the foundation of your interviews. I have talked to so many colleagues who applied to so many different specialties, and from my own experiences, hobbies are mentioned in every interview, no matter what specialty you apply for. In addition, even when these people are reviewing the applications, you might have an interest that is similar to theirs. Or maybe that hobby that you don't think makes you unique is actually someone that 50% of the residents in that program also have in common with you, and they might think that you may make a great fit and they may invite you for the interview based off of the culture of the program and how they think you'll fit in. So the next thing you can consider if your step scores are on the lower side, you can consider taking step 3, especially if you're an IMG. And this isn't something that I strongly recommend, but I think that if you didn't do as well on step 1 and step 2 as you hoped, taking step 3 can help enhance your application because a lot of times programs are afraid you're going to not pass step 3, and this eliminates that fear in general. So the next thing I'll say is submit your application as early as possible. And this doesn't mean you shouldn't have anyone proofread it. This means you should have many people proofread it and make sure it is as perfect as possible, but you want to have it in early. If you have an outstanding document that you think is going to enhance your application, submit the application anyways and add the document that you think will enhance your application when it comes in. It's important that you have your application in on time because although most programs accept applications through November, sometimes even December, they still have a limited amount of interview slots. And you don't want your application to be looked over just because you either didn't know the timeline of the match cycle or you were waiting for a supplementary document to enhance the application that now has been looked over because there are no more interview slots available. So the next few things I'm going to talk about aren't necessarily things that can enhance your application, but they can enhance your chance at either getting an interview or matching. And the first thing is if you didn't get enough interviews or if you didn't hear back from a program you're interested in, send them an email. I don't mean send 50 emails to all the programs who didn't answer you. I mean send emails to the programs you are genuinely interested in and haven't heard back from. You want the email to say why you specifically want to come to that program. It can be very hard for programs to determine who actually applied because they want to go there and who applied because they needed to apply to 120 programs and didn't know where else to apply, so they just picked this program. So write the specifics in the email, whether it's they have an NIH-funded researcher you're looking forward to working with, whether they have surgical subspecialties you're looking to do a fellowship in, whatever the reason you're interested in the program is, make sure you write down the specifics. Don't send programs the same generic email, because that's just as bad as applying to places you really don't want to go just because you have to hit a target number. The next thing I'll talk about is ranking. And obviously you have to go through the application process and the interview process before you even worry about ranking programs. But I bring this up because every single year, people try to beat the algorithm and rank programs based off of what they think the program thought of them, and that's not how the algorithm works. You need to rank based off of your personal preferences, and likewise, the program will do the same. Do not try to be a mind reader and interpret signs that don't exist from program directors. Generally speaking, programs are nice to everyone on interview day. So yes, they were probably nice to you, but they were also probably nice to everyone else. So don't go based off this false assumption that you think that they're going to take you. That's not how the algorithm works. And so the next thing I'll say is interview well. And obviously this is very vague, and I will have an upcoming video to help prepare you guys for interviews in the future. But interviewing well is important. I attended a conference and they had a panel of program directors, and in terms of ranking applicants after they had the interview, the top 2 factors when considering who to rank was their interactions with staff members and other residents, and communication and interpersonal skills. So put on your smiling face, be kind, be nice, be happy, and you should be fine. And the last thing I'm going to talk about is, what can I be doing right now? I get asked this question very often. What can I be doing right now to make sure that I have a strong application when it comes time to apply for residency? And if you're in your first 2 years of medical school, this is a really great time to get in your community outreach and your volunteer experiences. You can go about obtaining these opportunities in a couple of different ways. I think the 2 easiest ways to find volunteer opportunities are, 1, Google volunteer opportunities near me or community outreach positions near me, and you will likely get a list of homeless shelters or soup kitchens or road races that need volunteers, something like that you can sign up to volunteer at. They're usually looking. The other thing you can do is reach out to either a preceptor or a professor on campus, because oftentimes they are aware of organizations that are looking for a little bit of extra help, and they'll be able to connect you with that organization to get you some volunteer or community service in. So the other thing I recommend for basic science students is create a running list. And what I mean by this is have a Google Doc or a Microsoft Word doc that you can keep adding new experiences to. In this document, you obviously want to include what the project or activity was. You want to include what dates you performed it, and you want to include what organization and who the preceptor or leader of the activity or project was. Also, you're going to want to write a short description of the activity and what your duties specifically were. This is going to be helpful because when you have to ask for letters of recommendation in 3rd year, your preceptors and attendings are going to ask you for a CV, and this will lay a foundation for your CV, so that's largely done instead of being a daunting task that you have to think back of all of the different activities that you may or may not remember doing. You may or may not remember who led them, and you may or may not remember what organization it was. This will also come in handy when you apply for residency, because the application is literally what I just talked about. It asks you to fill in the organization, it asks you to fill in the activity, it asks you for a description, and it asks you for the dates. So if you're doing this, it's going to be way easier come application time, and it's going to take away a lot of the stress of the application. So in addition to the description that describes the activity and your duties, I also used to like to include a short sentence at the end about how those skills that I used or acquired from that specific activity or project would contribute to my development as a physician and how I thought they would be helpful. So that's all I have for today. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you found this video very helpful and the information very useful. If you are applying for the match this year, best of luck. And as always, don't forget to like, don't forget to subscribe, and don't forget to follow me on Instagram.